Hello everyone, it's me Tabo and welcome to another episode of Coding for Superheroes. So in today's lesson, I'm going to show you how to use the halftone post-processing effect. In addition to that, I'm also going to be showing you how to use the outline pass. I've used this in my previous tutorials. Because they've made changes to how you use the outline pass, that tutorial may not work the way that it should from the time that I created it. So I will also put this link in the description to that tutorial just in case anybody who's watching this tutorial might want to actually go back to that one, because that is more focused on the outline pass. But in this one, I will be mainly focusing on the halftone post-processing effect. And so with that said, we can just jump right in. If you are new to the channel, then please be sure to subscribe. And while you're at it, just take a second of your time to hit that like button and also hit the notification bell so that you don't miss out on upcoming tutorials. Thank you. So as usual, I've got my boilerplate code. And so in this lesson, what I will be needing is a couple of post-processing effect modules that will be necessary for this lesson. And that includes an effect composer, a render pass, halftone pass. I'll be using a GUI so that I can illustrate better. We'll be using an outline pass, shader pass, output pass, and FXAA shader. So as usual, we've got our renderer. Then we've set the size to Windows device pixel ratio. Here we've got a camera, we've got a scene, and I've set the background to this color, to a grayish color. The camera is already set in the position Z to 50. We're using our orbit camera as well. And so in here, this is where all the rendering will be happening. So in this scene, I'll be using an ambient light and a point light. So here I create an ambient light and I will set the intensity to 1.5 and then I will add it to the scene. Then after that, we'll create a point light. We'll set the intensity to 100. And in this scene, we're going to be using shadows. So we'll set the light to cast shadows. So cast shadows equals to true. And this is the size of the map that we're going to be using for our shadow. We're going to set it to 512, which is pretty much a default. So for this scene, it's quite sufficient. Then after that, we will set the camera near to 0.5 and camera far to 500. And so next up, I will be creating our background box that you see rotating. This is what that is. So this is created from a box geometry and we've set the dimensions to this. So X is 20, then the Y is 30, and then Z is 20. We create a mesh standard material and we give it this color, and for the emissive as well, we give it this color, and then we set the side to backside. After that, we create a mesh out of it, and then we set receive shadow to true. And then next, I will create a cube render target. Now this is going to be used for the environment map. Okay, I'm using the cube camera to create an environment map texture. So we'll set the webgl cube render target to 1024, and then over here we'll create the camera. So these are the settings, 0.1, 20, and then we will use the camera render target. This is gonna be the texture. So we'll set the position Y to 0, and then we'll add the camera. Well, this is actually not even really necessary. Okay, so over here we'll create a variable called pi, and pi will be equal to math pi times 2 divided by 4. And this is just the value that we're going to be using for the positioning of the cubes that we're about to create here. So I create box R, which is equal to an empty array. Then I'll create a for loop, and this for loop will be looping 8 times. So inside I will create a box material using a mesh font, and these are the settings that I'll be using. So for emissive, I'll be using a random color. And then for the environment map, we'll be using the cube render target texture, which we derived from here. This will be generated by the cube cam. Next, we create a mesh, and this mesh will be also created from this box that we created over here. So we're just going to clone it and then give it a new material. So we'll also set the cast shadow to true, and then we'll set a scale of 0.1, and then we'll give it this material over here, box material. Then after that, we create an if statement. We say if I is less than 4, then we're going to position 4 boxes in this Y position. And if I is bigger than 4, then we will set the positioning to this Y position. So over here, we're just going to use some math functions to position it in the X and Z position. Well, same thing over here, but this will be centered in -8Y position. So once we're done, then we will add each box to the box R array, and then we will add each box mesh to the scene. Alright, next we're just gonna add our cube mesh. This is the background box that is rotating, and then we add our point light as well. Alright, next I will create an object called params, and this will be holding the values that we'll be using to tweak our halftone pass values. Okay, so we have shape, radius, rotate R, B, and G. We have scatter, blending node, grayscale, which is a boolean, and disable. Alright, next comes the setup for our post-processing effects. We're going to create a composer from an effect composer, and then we're going to pass it the renderer. Then we create a render pass, and the render pass will be passed scene and camera. Next we create a halftone pass, and halftone pass will be using the Windows inner width and Windows inner height, and then we'll be passing the params, which is this over here. Next we'll create an outline pass. It takes a vector 2. Inside the vector 2 we'll be giving it the inner width and the inner height. Then we'll pass it the scene and the camera. So next we're going to set the outline pass edge thickness to 1, and then we're going to make the edge strength to 10. Next we create an output pass. Okay, so output pass will just be instantiated using the class output pass. Alright, as a side note, I just want to backtrack a bit. Earlier I mentioned that setting up the outline pass post-processing effect is different to how I did it in the previous tutorial that I created. So what has changed is the output pass. So before you could set it up using a render pass, outline pass, and then effect fxaa. So you only needed these 3. So just to make it clear so that you don't get confused, at the moment to set up the halftone pass only, you need render pass and halftone pass. The 3 below are not necessary. So these 3 are what you need in addition to creating an outline pass. So backtracking, what do you need for an outline pass? Render pass, outline pass, output pass, effect fxaa. That's what you need for outline pass post-processing effect. So next we'll create a variable called effects fxaa, and this will be using a shader pass, and inside the shader pass we'll pass it the fxaa shader. It is this one over here. Then after doing that, then we're gonna go to the uniforms and the resolution. The value of the resolution will be set to 1 divided by Windows inner width and 1 divided by Windows inner height. Then after that, then we're going to take the compose, and then we're going to add the different passes. So we will start with the render pass, then we'll add the halftone pass, then we add the outline pass, then output pass, and last but not least we'll add the effect fxaa pass. Okay, so next we create another object called controller. The controller will have similar values to our params, and then we'll assign each of these the values of our halftone pass. So we'll go to the uniforms, and then the value thereof, we'll pass that to our properties inside. So the radius will be equal to the radius, rotate R to R. Well, I think this is kind of obvious, so you can just have a look at it and then assign the values accordingly. And then next we create a function called onGUI_change. This is where we're going to be changing the values using our GUI. So what's going to happen is that the value of the halftone, whatever value is assigned to the controller, whenever you make changes to the controller, then basically the halftone uniform value will be equal to that value. So that's all that's going to be doing. So it's pretty much kind of a repetition of this, but in the opposite direction. In here we were setting the value of the controller to that of the halftone pass, and then here we're setting that of the halftone pass to the controller. Okay, next we're gonna create a variable called halftone, and this will just be a GUI. Okay, so we're gonna create a GUI folder. So this GUI is derived from this over here. Then we're gonna create a folder from it, and then we're gonna call the folder halftone controls. So we're just basically adding the different values from our controller to our GUI. Okay, so this is just all the different properties that we have in our controller. So we're just kind of telling it how it's going to be using them. So we're setting our min and max, for instance. So the minimum will be 0, maximum will be 25. And so that's what that's going to be doing. If you would like an in-depth explanation of how to set up a GUI, you can go to one of my tutorials. I'll put a link in the description for the beginner tutorial so that you can understand how to set up a GUI. But in this case, I'm not going to spend a lot of time explaining how a GUI is set up. So basically, we're just using the different properties and we're going to use them for our GUI. Alright, so after all of that, I'm going to then assign the selected object of our outline pass equal to the box array. The box array is the one that holds all the box meshes. So basically, all the objects that are inside of there are going to be highlighted with this outline. And then I'll create a clock instance of the new 3.clock. Alright, so inside of our render function, I'm going to create a variable called elapsed time, and this will be using the clock's elapsed time. And then inside this for loop, this is just where I'm going to be animating the scale of our different cubes, just to make things look interesting. And then over here, this is where I'm also animating the color values of our material. So the cube meshes material, that is the environment box, this is going to be using these values. Well, the color changing, this is what this is responsible for. And then this is just the rotation on the y-axis for the cube mesh once again. And then over here, we will update our cube camera. Now the cube camera is the one that is providing the environment map textures. All right, and then underneath here, we're gonna then render our scene. So we're gonna be using the composer instead of this renderer over here. All right, there's also one other thing that I need to make you aware of. I realized only towards the end that the renders were missing shadows. I don't know how I missed that, but I actually didn't notice. So I just went back and so the part that is highlighted, just make changes there in the renderer. Just make sure that you enable the shadow map on the renderer, and then you set the shadow map type to 3.pc soft shadow map. And as you can see, that's what it's supposed to look like. So yeah, I am sorry about that, but yeah, it's too late for me to do anything about it. All right, so with all that set up, let's have a look and see what our scene looks like. All right, here we go. So this is what our scene looks like. So already you can see that our outline pass is already working. So over here we've got our GUI, and this is where we can then start messing around with the different values. So at the moment it is disabled. So if I click on this, then this is how it's enabled. So these are the default settings. So I can just kind of close everything like that. So the default setting for this usually is 4. Okay, so you can start from there. So this is what it looks like. So I'm just going to go through the different values. So over here, we've got the different shapes. As you can see at the moment, we've got dot, and then we've got ellipse. So that you can see the difference, I'm just going to bump it up, and then you can kind of see what that's doing. So this is what dot looks like, and this is just the radius of it. So I'm just going to bump it up. Next we've got ellipse. That's what the ellipse looks like. Then next we've got line. Now this is kind of my favorite because I think you can kind of come up with like really cool stylized looks. I think for games, that sort of thing, you can really play around and just put your own little twist to it. Then over here we've got square. Okay, so this is what the squares look like. So I'm just basically changing the radius for all of them. So I can maybe go back to line, and then over here you can change the rotation. So this rotation affects the different color values. So this one would be for red, this one would be green, and this one would be for blue. So because this keeps changing color, you can see that it's not always going to be visible, the changes that are happening. So depending on the color that you're changing, this is how you're going to see the difference. So usually I like putting them like that. You have to be kind of sensitive in how you tweak these, because to get the right look, it's not always easy. And so over here we've got scattering, right? Now scattering is kind of, it's randomness basically, because as you can see, these lines are pretty straight. You can see that on the screen, but when I use scattering, then it kind of randomizes everything. So you can tweak it until you get the kind of look that you like. And then over here, we've got grayscale. Okay, so grayscale basically is what it says, grayscale, which I personally kind of like, because like I said, I can think for like games, you can come up with like a really cool look, a stylized look, for instance. And then over here, we've got our blending. So I'm going to turn off that. Okay, I'll leave the scatter just a bit. Then over here, this is blending. So this is just basically the blending factor. As you can see, when it's 0, then we don't see any effect. But then when I move it, then you can see then the post-processing effects take effect. Then over here you've got then the different blending modes. So by default it's on linear and then multiply, so you can see that's what multiply looks like. And add, lighter, then darker. Okay, some are not so visible because this is off, so let me just kind of go through them again. So there's multiply, there's add, lighter, and that's darker. Then right over here, then this is where you can disable it once again. Then from here you can just kind of play around and then see what kind of look you want to get from it. I think what you can also do is you can also animate these values so that you can really get something interesting out of it. So yeah, that's pretty much how you set that up. I played around with that a little bit. Like I used it on like an old scene for a game just to see what that would look like there. So I can just kind of show you quickly what that would look like, or if I played around with it. But pretty much that's how you set it up, and you can just play with the settings until you get something that you like. Alright, as you can see, this is a setup that I created just to see what it would look like in a different environment. And I also animated the rotation because you can see it's moving a bit. So I think, yeah, it's all up to your imagination. So I can kind of use this if I don't want to use like a typical pixelated kind of look, then I can maybe think of this as an alternative. Maybe I can even mix it with other post-processing effects. Okay, so without saying too much, this was it for this lesson. So I hope you enjoy yourself. With all that said, love and peace. I'm out.